4 decades in your living room. Well, not technically in your living room, but coming to your living room as the news anchor on KCCI. Last night we gathered for dinner and all the storytellers told each other stories, and we talked about how it's so great to know that his arms actually move and that he does wear pants. Kevin Cooney, everybody.
In 1961, the dinner table at the Cooney house, the greatest place in the world. You might say we were Kennedy Catholics. In Beaverdale, we were Catholics. And that was when John Kennedy was just elected president. 8 people in this family around this dinner table every night. 6 kids, wide range of ages, big old heavy dinner table, legs the size of legs. And we were all at one stage or another students at Holy Trinity, home of the mighty, mighty Beavers. Everywhere you go, people want to know who we are. So we tell them, we're the Beavers, mighty, mighty Beavers. Everywhere we go, people want to know. Conversations around this dinner table were probably a lot like yours in one sense. What'd you do at school today? Tell me about your day. But at our house, if you said, nothing, it wasn't good enough. Sitting at the end of the table was my dad. Probably like maybe at your table too. And sitting right next to him was my mom. Probably like your table. The difference was, at this table, my dad was a city editor of the Des Moines Tribune. My mother was a feature writer for the Des Moines Sunday Register. So when you said, nothing, that wasn't going to pass muster with the city editor or the feature writer. You had to tell a story. You had to tell them what was going on. You had to tell them that Mike Dwyer and Sidney Fitzgerald got caught in the back of the church naked. Well, you didn't have to. Or that Michael Wright had a meeting with the school board. Sister Clement's school board. Early on, I found myself thinking of things that were happening that day, and what story I was going to tell that night at dinner table. There would be a variety of different stories that would come up, but without going into any great detail, the important thing was I was thinking ahead. Out on the playground, Mark Flanders broke his finger playing softball. I'm going to tell. When they ask about that, I'm going to tell that story. Well, when Sister Donald disappeared for a few months, we'll tell that story. I think she made potholders. It was early on during this process, probably about 3rd grade, when I was Den 3, Pack 77, Cub Scouts, Holy Trinity, home of the mighty, mighty Beavers. And we took a trip, field trip, Channel 8. I got to meet Bill Riley. And we appeared on the Variety Theater, his afternoon cartoon show, where we told stories. everybody had to tell Bill a short story. I told him about my pets. Told him about the dog we had that had died, and the chameleon that we had that had died, and the birds that we had that had died, and the rabbit hutch and that we had in the back that had dead rabbits in it. I could just see my mother sitting at home. When I got home, she goes, the ASPCA is going to call. I just know that. A couple of years after that, Sister Donald, before she went away to make potholders, had a bulletin board newspaper. Now, I don't know if any of you had bulletin board newspapers when you were growing up. The concept was pretty simple. Bulletin board. And students would write stories. You'd take your blue line paper, fold it in half, and there's your column. And you'd pin it up with your story on the bulletin board. And you had a newspaper about what was going on with the students. It was a brilliantly simple idea. And I loved contributing. 1965, April. There's a flood in Des Moines. Not quite the 93 flood, but it was a pretty big flood. I was in 7th grade, and 7th and 8th graders at Holy Trinity, home of the Mighty Mighty Beavers, were allowed to skip school and go out and help sandbag. You're in 7th grade, yeah, I'm gonna go to school. Hell no, I'm gonna go help sandbag. Tim Sullivan, Tom Bozeman, and I are gonna save the city. And we did. We went and sandbagged, and we saved Birdland's swimming pool. But I was thinking all that time, this is going to be a great story for the bulletin board. And even before I went, I threw a camera over my neck. And that was the first time I realized that words and pictures could have an impact. All those bulletin board stories were filled with, you know, what was going on in the 7th grade. But my story about the flood was about something that everybody had seen on the news, and it was like, oh, it was really cool, you were there. And I thought, this, at the time, in my very basic knowledge, this was something different. This had a different effect. Cindy Fitzgerald and Patty Michaels really, really liked it. A few years later, I'd have the opportunity to report on another flood. More on that later, and the parallels that are drawn. Just wanted to plant that one in your mind. So, a few years later, I'm at Dowling High School, home of the Mighty Mighty Maroons, and I'm writing for the Aquan, taking pictures for the Aquan. That's the school newspaper, and taking pictures and, well, not really writing stories, but making up stories for the yearbook. The storytelling thing is getting to be more than just a fun thing. It's getting to be a passion. I really, really love to tell stories. My junior year, everything changed for the better. I had been working as a copy boy at the Des Moines Register. When your mother and father work at the Des Moines Register, you get to be a copy boy at the Des Moines Register. It's nepotism at its very best. Barb Mack was one of my fellow copy kids. Some guy by the name of Bill Bryson was another one of them. And then there was me. And it was a close-knit group, as close as you could be with a bunch of, juniors in high school, but nothing would ever tear me away from tearing copy off wire service machines and talking to reporters and finding out where they'd been and going into the photo lab and literally seeing the news develop in front of your eyes. Nothing could ever tear me away from that. And then I remembered that trip that I had taken as a Cub Scout to KRNT. sent out a few feelers, and once again, thanks to Dad, who knew somebody who knew somebody. Turns out there was a job available at Channel 8 for a schmucky little junior at Dowling. And I got to peek behind the curtain one more time. Except this time I got to stay. I got to work with Bill Riley, and I got to work with Russ Van Dyke, and I got to work with Paul Rhodes and Pete Taylor. This kid was in heaven. I wasn't quite writing the news yet, but I was helping with it, and I was again watching the news develop. Eventually, I went to college at Iowa State University, home of the mighty, mighty Cyclones. And I had a chance to study under somebody who shared my passion, shared my love for journalism, shared my love for storytelling, a guy by the name of Jack Shelley. Now, think about this, if you could. Think of the 2 or 3 or 4 most admirable people that you have in the field that you choose to pursue. And think of having the luxury of working with all these people. With Russ Van Dyke and studying with Jack Shelley and learning literally at the knee of your mother and father about telling stories. It really, really turned into a love. But love was, well, growing in other ways too. At Iowa State University, I used to sit in Jack Shelley's class. It was just really annoying sorority who sat behind me. But she was pretty nice. But we were in relationships at the time, not with each other. But there was something there. You could tell. You could just tell. And I'll bet you everybody here knows exactly what I'm talking about. You could just tell. Well, 6 years later, this sorority gal comes to work at Channel 8. And Molly is welcomed with open arms, and we renew that friendship. We knew each other as fellow journalists. We'd run in, she was working for KCBC, to test your knowledge, an old radio station that doesn't exist anymore, but she was working there, and we'd run into each other at the State House and on stories and everything like that. But once she started working at the station, something special happened. We'd see each other every day, we'd carpool together. One thing led to another. And there was a different sort of love that developed out of journalism. I followed her to California, proposed to her in San Jose, got married in Des Moines, went back to San Jose and had the opportunity to come back home to Des Moines one more time. You know the old saying, you can't go home again? You can once. But being there with the person I love made it absolutely fantastic. The risk was, what the heck? We'll find something. We got each other. Well, fast forward 35 years. Last year, I announced I was retiring. And I said, you know, people were saying, hey, how can you leave this? This is so much fun. This is so great. Don't you love your job and everything like that? It's like, it made me start to think about what had made me love what I do so much. And I went back to the dining room table on 49th Street in Beaverdale. And I went back to Sister Donald's class in the flood. And I went back to the flood of '93, where Molly was sitting next to me for about 6 hours on the air, and finally kicked me off the set because I smell so bad. But I told you I was going to come back to that because it was while we were sitting there on the set telling people how to manually flush their toilets. Do I need to explain how to do that? Ask someone who was here 25 years ago. And I thought, this is what we've been doing all this time. This is the service that we provide. This is what we're here for. This is what we do. We're here to tell stories. But above and beyond that, when I stop to think about it, and people would say, how can you walk away from something like this? Obviously, you love it. You really do. And it's like, I didn't love my job. I love what the job did for me. I love that it helped me fall in love with telling stories, to fall in love with my wife, to renew the love of the family. One of my favorite movies is Love Actually. At the very beginning of that, Hugh Grant plays the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And he gives a great monologue talking about how when things are down and he gets down, he likes to think of the arrival gate at Heathrow Airport. And it's filled with mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters. And it's all about love. He says when the Twin Towers got hit, the final phone calls weren't about hate or revenge. They were about love. So it really does prove love actually is all around.